Hello, Realtors. Welcome back to GADcast, brought to you by NSBAR. My name is Joe Roth, and I'm your local Government Affairs Director here at NSBAR. We're continuing our series today of discussions with candidates that have been supported by your Realtors Political Action Committee. Today, we're talking with one of our very own, Realtor Mary Rosinski, who's running for alderman in Evanston. So let's get started. Mary, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So obviously we've known each other for quite a while, but for those watching and listening that don't know you, let's talk a little bit about yourself and your current run for alderman in Evanston.
Well, I've been a realtor for 40 years, and I grew up in a real estate family who my mom started her own company, and I have 7 brothers and sisters, all which had real estate licenses. So dinner conversation usually surrendered about real estate and what was going on in the local communities. So in Evanston, I've been here for 32 years now, or 30 years just about, and I've raised 5 kids and I've worked full time. And I've been involved in a ton of organizations here in Evanston, and, tried to always go to the city council and talk about things. And I feel like I've spent so much time working with other grassroots people saving things in this Evanston. Like we had to save Central Street, and we had to save Harley Clark, and we had to save the libraries, all these basic needs, but we did it in front of council. But these last 4 years, we've lost so much ground. They closed the libraries, they just quit listening to the people. And then we lost our zoning at Northwestern, and Northwestern got commercial zoning basically for free, which was just kind of that was kind of like the straw that just said, okay, I need to be in, because there were hundreds of people on all of these organizations. So I just decided that it would be better if I was on the council rather than in front of it, because I thought that so many people were coming together across Evanston that were feeling so frustrated, and there was such an erosion of trust in our city, and it had kept getting worse and worse. So I felt like we needed more creative ideas, and we needed to be more open to the public. And I think we needed to follow our zoning and our comprehensive plan, or change it, have a public discussion. If we're not going to follow, then let's openly discuss why it's not working. But as it is now, it's very arbitrary. So some people get changes and some people don't. And there was a sort of a feeling of distrust. And I really love Evanston, and I want to stay here. So I want to be in with the group that wants positive change in Evanston. So that was kind of why I'm running. And since I go across so many communities, I actually service about 14 communities in my business. So no one on the council has much real estate experience. So the other thing that drives me crazy is we don't manage our property. I know, this just drives me crazy. We so mismanage our properties, and then we buy them high and we sell them low. And I felt, as a taxpayer, I want to change that conversation to let's maintain our assets. And then if we are going to sell them, let's sell them high for the taxpayer. So it was just kind of that whole combination of things.
Well, and I think that you've hit it perfectly. Now is the right time for,
Right.
Specifically for you to run for office. Because in our time working together, I've always found you as open to learning and trying new things. And I think that's what we need right now, is that openness and honesty and that kind of inclusive mentality where we can all work together and achieve things and work through our differences to find something meaningful.
That's exactly how I feel. And I will say, from working with so many different organizations, and I'm in the city, and I've been a founding member of 6 of the organizations, and then 3 other established organizations, and working with these people, oh my God, Evanston is so filled with creative, dynamic people that if we would just let them have more leeway, we would have even a better city, because we need to expand our tax base. We need to be creative, and we need to be looking for other solutions and really listening to our residents. Because there's just such a wealth of information in this city.
And so you're an active is probably an understatement, active member at NSBAR, member of the Government and Political Issues Committee. So of course you're forced to hear me talk at length a lot about unintended consequences. It's something that I hit on a lot, but it's something we see a lot in local policy issues, especially on the North Shore, is we talk about the policies and we inevitably end up about the unintended consequences. But, as a realtor, as, your professional life, I believe that you're probably more inclined to understanding unintended consequences and to kind of catching on to those things, because let's face it, you're working on kind of all sides on transactions. You're representing buyers, sellers, and whoever, understanding the full dynamics of the picture. I think that would give you an advantage as an alderman in Evanston.
Well, I would hope so, because I think a lot of what is going on is listening and learning, because, it is never ending when we're learning. And I've learned so much from being on the committee with you and what's going on in other communities, so that when it gets proposed here, I feel I have some background as to be able to at least present at council. There's this that could happen or that, and it might not be the best policy for homeowners. Because I care about our property values, because that helps our tax base. And I also worry about, as you said, the unintended consequences. Like, I can think of a couple things right now. And, as we're looking at allowing more dense housing, which has its merits, so that you could possibly maybe have more affordable housing. But then if you have people who have just spent $1 million on their house on a nice lot, and the lot next to them becomes a 4-story building, is your unintended consequence going to be that now we're not going to have people who feel safe investing their money in your community, because what they hope to live, which was a residential neighborhood, or they hope to live downtown, what was really active, wherever it is they hope that environment was going to be, is changed arbitrarily.
Yeah.
So things like that, but it is important. And I think one of the great things about being on the Government Affairs Committee in particular is that I get to hear what's going on in other communities and what they're doing right, and what has had, as you say, the unintended consequences of, inspections that aren't necessary, or things that held up closing, or are transfer taxes regressive or progressive? I know whenever there seems to be a problem, the first solution seems to be, let's increase the transfer tax stamps. And I'm just like, that's not the answer. The answer is we have to stop spending money we don't have. We have to stop mismanaging our projects, and we have to start getting better bids. And so there's a lot of different things that need to be out there and accessible to the public. And I think if you talk with different people from different communities, that's another thing that's so great being in the North Shore Board of Realtors, because we have like thousands of people. And so if I'm having a question, I can go, okay, who's having this up in Highland Park, or who's out in Barrington, or who's this? And what did you guys do when you got to this issue? And I'm a really big green space person, and I believe you have to save your natural assets. And they were at one point in Evanston going to privatize a huge part, like 2.5 acres of our lakefront. And that would be in my ward. But it shouldn't be privatized at all, because that's the most valuable real estate we have for the enjoyment of everybody. And trying to explain to them that parks and lakefront increases your tax base for all the neighborhoods around, because it adds to the value. And just kind of having them think of what creates a community that you want to come to. What are they? It doesn't all have to be upper or lower, but it has to be welcoming, and it has to have lots of places that you can go just to relax, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to go do it.
That's a great point. And you hit on something there for me, which is my next question. Because one of the perpetual issues in Evanston, one of the things that we're always talking about is affordable housing.
Oh, yeah.
I've always put forward that affordable housing, we support housing affordability. And I think that, but in general, it's a policy of details, because affordable housing is a really big umbrella term.
Right.
And, I've often believed that when we hear people talking about affordable housing, not everyone means the same thing, because you have workforce housing, you have very low income housing, you have subsidized housing. Homelessness is a whole separate issue, but sometimes falls under that affordable housing category. And so you kind of need to break that up and try and adequately address, in a very targeted way, each one of those pieces. But with that, if you're on city council, how do you adequately, number one, try to prioritize or sort through some of that?
That is a great question. I think part of it is we have to define, like you said, what is the affordable housing, and what is our measure of success in each of those categories. And we have another issue here. I mean, we have an AMI in this city that's about 91,000, right? Area median income. And so that means if you're not going to spend more than 30% of your income, then maybe somewhere around $2,200 to $2,500 rent. But if you are a minority or a Black, your AMI is more like 50,000. So you have a different amount of money that you're going to have to do. So you're not even beginning to meet that standard to keep the diversity that we want to keep in this town. And I think that's just one aspect of it. And then the question of, are we dealing with seniors with fixed incomes? And then our taxes keep rising. So then we have to deal with seniors and say, how do we keep them in their town if they're on fixed incomes? And and then we have the inclusionary housing ordinance, which in the last couple of years that they've been doing it, I know one woman was talking at council last week, and she said, we've added 2,000 units of housing rentals and whatever to Evanston over the last couple of years, but there's only been 60 for all the variances that have been given that went to affordable housing. Yet they're mostly micro apartments. So what our biggest need is, according to our housing study from a couple of years ago, was we need family housing. Because if you have a family of 2 or 3 and you need a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, we don't have that inventory for that person. I mean, I just rented a place that's a 2 bedroom and a den, and that was 2,000, but it would ordinarily be in a newer building somewhere around 3,000 to 3,500. So I think we have to define what is it we're trying to do. And I just listened to a TED talk that from the mayor in Albuquerque, and then another guy in Utah who is working on homeless programs that have actually been successful. So I think we reach out to people like that and we say, how are you successful on this? Because that frees up a whole lot of financial resources that then we can use. So I think once we define what we're talking about, we can start tackling each category individually.
I think you've got great points there, Mary. Leveraging resources out in the world and seeing what best practices might fit into Evanston is a great strategy and approach. And I think you also hit another, nail right on the head, is that throughout the northern suburbs, and this is beyond Evanston, and you see it especially into Lake County, but the largest barrier to affordable housing is property taxes.
Oh, yeah.
You see that in so many communities where the property tax burden is the obstacle itself. And so it's definitely not an easy policy, or there's no easy solutions to it, but I think that approach is wise.
Well, and I think, you bring the property taxes, a lot of times people want to get very upset with the landlords, whether or not it's commercial or residential. But the problem is, like, I'm a landlord, I live in a 2-flat, but I know every month before I walk out the door, I have to pay probably around $1,200 to $1,250 just for taxes. and going out of there. So these people, and commercial, it's even higher. So we have to figure out a way to support our business districts, expand our tax base, and then make it more affordable for people. Like, for example, you were asking about, like, if we're talking about family, we said family housing affordability in Evanston is probably the highest demand. Then we can go to existing landlords who have units, and maybe they are a 3-bedroom 2,500, but maybe we can use part of our affordable housing fund to subsidize what that person can't do. Because I know you had brought that up, and I think it's a great idea. Because then you're helping your local landlords, you're cycling the money back into it, and you're freeing up other money for other purposes. So I think that connections.
Yeah, that's a great point, that, because you have so many units that are almost affordable. They're almost at that affordable, and really just a micro subsidy, a small grant to landlords can address that and close those gaps. So I agree. I think it is time to start thinking creatively about affordable housing, and not necessarily.
It's interesting because it's hard to put down exactly how much money we spend on affordable housing and housing, and where it's coming from, because we have the home funds, and we have we got like over $1.5 million in this coronavirus fund. So you need to track and see where was it, and was it effective? And, in going back to the homelessness, I think we spent $700,000 putting people up in hotels. Whereas if we had a program and worked more with the other Cook County suburban, we might be able to start tackling that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's again another great idea, is taking a larger scale approach to it, and that the reality is that on the North Shore, your life doesn't end at a municipal boundary.
Oh no, not exactly.
So again, you're running for alderman. How can anybody listening find out more about your campaign and how it's going? How can we keep up to date?
Okay, well, my website is rosinski2021.org. That is that. You can email me at rosinski2021@gmail.com. And that's pretty much the best two ways. You can always, if you're a realtor, you can pick up the phone and call me. I'll take a call from anyone, and just to hear, their thoughts, because I really do want to hear what people are talking about and what's important in their communities, and any other solutions that people may have. And if they think mine isn't right, please just tell me. I'm a really good listener, because I think one thing that real estate does get you, and it is, you learn both sides, and you learn not to take it personally, because it's just, our job is to solve problems and to help people move forward with their lives, and to help people who have a lot and people who have a little to have security in their lives. And I was talking with my brother, and he was funny. We were talking about conflict, because I was on an interview, and the question was, how will you deal with conflict if you're two people in your same ward have different opinions? And I was saying about listening. He goes, oh, you missed that one. He goes, you tell them you came from a family of 8, your dad married a woman with a family of 9, you have 17 people in your family, and you still get together for Christmas. So you've learned to navigate all sorts of differences. So I think, people, if we just try to think the best in people, that they really do want to make it better, I think we start out the ground. And I usually approach people with, I really do think that they want to help solve the problem. And so that's where I would come from. So please, Mary Rosinski, rosinski2021.org. And you can call me, email me at rosinski2021@gmail. And I will get back to you.
Mary, so much appreciate your time. I know how crazy your schedule is now.
Yeah, it's pretty busy.
If I were ever to hold up a realtor champion, I think we've got one right here. Mary, again, many thanks.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
And that does it for this episode of GADcast. If you have questions, comments, or things you want us to talk about, just shoot me an email. It's joe@nsbar.org. So until next time, be well, everyone.